Yes, I need the job.
So the loonies are outside in the real world, and here we are with the keys to the loony bin, boys.
You might actually want to be grateful when you're about to make some decent money.
What's the catch?
Patricia Willard scandal, 1984.
Ah, man, that was a hard day at work.
Man, might even call it a killer.
Killer week?
Yeah.
Oh man, it is really hard working that insane asylum for an entire week straight, getting all the hazmat out. Let me tell you.
Asbestos shit is a real killer.
Yeah, man. Beers after work.
Yeah.
Beers after work.
Beer o'clock.
Woo! Cheers.
What are we drinking today?
Oh, we're drinking Yo-Ho Rojo Craft Michelada. And the reason we got this beer is because in this movie, there is an eyeball lobotomy, and there's a nice, cool-looking eyeball on this.
The hell flavor is that shit?
Is it weird?
Yeah. I think there's some hazmat in there.
Oh, man. Oh.
Use your imagination.
These shrinks figured that with these new techniques they designed, they could release hidden memories.
Session 9. Now, let's get into Session 9. Deep dive into this awesome horror film.
Yes, and this movie requires a deep dive. I'm going to start right off by saying this movie requires 2 viewings. And I saw it when I was when I was younger, when it first came out in 2001, I guess.
Okay.
And I never got back around to seeing it a second time, even though I knew it was the kind of film that really requires that, because there's a lot of revelations you learn at the end that really make it an interesting viewing once you know all that. So I really should have gone back and watched it a second time, more recent than now, but I'm glad we finally did because I love this movie. Based on the craft alone, this movie is a top-notch psychological horror. It is just so creepy, eerie, the atmosphere, the camera work in this movie, the sound design in this movie, everything from a technical level just comes together so well to make this one of the best psychological horror movies.
Yeah, it's a thing to marvel. It's a thing to just stare at and be glad it exists on a technical level. Now, whether or not people fully understand it or agree with what we're saying, I've read some criticism on it. Generally, it's a pretty beloved movie in the horror community and stuff like that. Most people do find it underrated. I've seen it on lists of underrated, and it is because it doesn't get enough love. I would consider myself a semi-aficionado on this movie because I actually did, in college, write a paper about this movie. I called the paper The Atmosphere of Creepy. And it was just basically about Brad Anderson writing, directing, and editing this movie.
Yes,
he did his own editing in this movie, and I think he did a fucking spectacular job crafting this movie from the get-go with his writing partner, Stephen Jovinda. He was also in the movie.
One of the characters in the movie.
I apologize if I'm saying his last name wrong because I think he helped create this amazing, eerie fucking story. And he's actually really good as Mike in the movie. Gives a lot of the exposition needed, but in a really natural way because it's based on who his character is. And that's another thing I love about this movie is like it's just chock full of really crisp, well-defined characters. I know these people's personalities, so when shit hits the fan and they go to where they go, whether you care about them or not, you know who they are and the decisions they make sense based on who they are. I love this movie so much. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. Based on how it's made, it actually really influenced me to want to become an editor because of what the tension that was built through the sound design, which we'll get into. The sound design, the layering of that, and the tension that's built from how it's cut.
Hello, Gordon.
So you have a crew who's been hired to clear asbestos and all this old material out of an old mental hospital, Danvers Mental Hospital, I think, in Massachusetts.
Yeah, in Massachusetts.
And these guys basically try to underbid the other guys by saying we can get it done in a week. So they're up against the clock. They bring in a crew of five guys, I believe, to clear this place out in a week, and they're supposed to be working nonstop around the clock to make that happen. One of the funny things in this movie, you rarely see them doing any work. They are constantly on break, at lunch, going back to the truck for something.
Yeah.
They're never getting this job done, but it's really cool, the structure of this movie. You see each day happen. There's a title card at the beginning of each day, and the story just gets eerier and creepier over the course of 4 or 5 days. It does not take long, and much like one of the key things in this movie, the claustrophobia you feel from the cinematography and the setting alone, I feel like the story does that to you as well. It sets you in this 4 or 5 days that you know this thing is going to play out, and the story just gets tighter and tighter around you and has this claustrophobic feel to it.
Yes, and
part of the reason I didn't revisit this movie, because you really do feel that claustrophobia ratchet up all the way to the end. You really can't breathe at times while watching this movie.
It takes it out of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say I've probably seen this movie 50 times.
Wow!
But then there's this whole subtext of the movie, which is the Mike character, who's this kind of like budding, about to go into law school guy who seems really smart, finds all the tape sessions of one of the patients, and that kind of fuels, that gives you as the viewer the option to go along with that. Like, is that what's making, is the story, these sessions on this reel-to-reel tape that he's listening to, is that what's fueling everyone's insanity? It doesn't have to be, but it's there as this added moment of creepy stuff. And then it does unfold as if, yes, this stuff has a lot to do with what's happening, especially with Gordon's character, who's the one who initially, spoilers, ends up killing everybody and going completely insane. Again, that's when Mike goes down into that room, that's another one of those rooms where you're just like, oh, like, how are some of these guys sitting in some of these areas by themselves? It's insane. The place is so scary.
Yeah, and the building, the place, the mental hospital, it really is a character in the movie. I mean, a lot of movies have done that in the past.
It's the main character.
The setting
movie,
becomes a character, but this one does it so well. I think Ben said there's a documentary that mentions how they didn't have to do a lot to make this place look as rundown and creepy as it really is.
Yeah.
And when you see it on camera, every frame of this movie has that haunted, creepy feel to it. I mean, every time they point the camera down a hallway, it is just creepy as hell. You're just waiting for something to cross the frame or whatever.
Yeah.
But it never really does that. It doesn't go for jump scares. This is a very effectively frightening movie without a single jump scare, as far as I know.
Yeah. No, there's no, because the sound design doesn't work that way.
Correct. The sound design does a lot of the hard work and doesn't need to play up the whole jump scare element.
There's one moment in the movie that's one of the scariest moments where the silhouette pops out behind that fence. But they just chose to. There's sound design in this scene, but it didn't cue you. It didn't cue your attention towards it as like, here's where you're supposed to be scared, and that makes it so much scarier than a jump scare. The way it pops out, and I never forget that scene. You're talking about the documentary Haunted Palace. That is an interesting documentary because, and you know, these are actors; they're melodramatic anyway. But a lot of them do talk.
David Caruso, melodramatic?
Yeah. Well, I don't think I can't remember if not, but. Peter Mullen's one who tells a story about when they were shooting on the rooftop during the phone scene, where he said in the middle of shooting he just kind of dazed off and thought about killing himself by jumping off of that roof.
We did a scene on the roof, and for a blip of a nanosecond, it was that short, I wanted to throw myself off the roof. You know, we're just chatting away, and it suddenly, just like a voice, was kind of trying it. Someone will catch you, it's a film. You know, actors don't fall off roofs. And that scared me. That really, it scared me of what you're capable of.
Jeez. You know, I don't know what kind of a person he is, to where maybe he just has these wacky stories. Maybe he's very Terrence Howard-ish.
Yeah.
It's an interesting documentary because a lot of people do think that that's a really haunted place, and to shoot there and to really shoot there, and to hear that the actors all did kind of have these experiences is kind of frightening in and of itself.
The story, as you said, is very heavy, very dark, very sad. That's a big reason why I couldn't revisit this film, because I remember the ultimate outcome of this film and how sad it can be.
Yeah.
But it was also stepping back into that place. That was another reason why I couldn't really revisit this movie, because you really do feel like you've been inside this place and you want to get out. As soon as you turn that DVD on, you're like, oh my God, when's this over? This place is creepy as hell.
That place the imagery in this movie stuck with me for years. It's still kind of there. It does that thing to you, like, I would say, like, recently, last year, The Entity, or even something like Hereditary, where, like, if you're sitting in your room alone on the edge of your bed, you think someone's up in the corner of your ceiling. Session 9 did this to me for years, because I was in the Navy when this movie came out, and I would be walking down these empty aircraft carrier P-ways, and all I would think about was the movie, you know. And then when you hear the music from the Climax Golden Twins, who did a brilliant score of this movie that's all over the map. I want to talk about the cast of this movie, because I've said before, for being one of my favorite films, it's not really the acting that stands out, but I do think the acting's good. I think there's a couple over-the-top moments from each and every one of the characters.
Yeah.
Maybe with the exception of the Mike guy.
Fuck you!
Fuck you. Fuck you.
Yeah, David Caruso. I like David Caruso.
I love David Caruso.
We said while watching
David Charisma.
You know, he plays himself often the same kind of character, but when he has good dialogue to really sell that type of character, it works. And in this film, it really works. He's got the dialogue there.
Oh, I think he's a very convincing actor. I mean, he has those facial expressions like he's a very relatable, normal human being, because he doesn't look like a movie star, you know, and nor is he.
One we haven't mentioned who they don't expand on a whole lot, Brandon Sexton III. But
Love my boy, Brandon Sexton III.
Every movie he's in, you know, with his little screen time, he's always memorable.
Yeah, and this is the first one where he's a little comic relief-ish and stuff. But and they give him all these quirks and stuff, like the nectophobia is really interesting, but plays a huge part in one of your favorite scenes in the movie that you like, of intensity.
Yeah.
Oh, that scene! Like, I dare you to make a scene that's that intense without like it's some monster or some fire from an alien spacecraft or a tidal wave. It's just a guy running from lights going out because he's afraid of the dark. Like, that's way more scary, you know?
Cinematography and sound design go a long way in making
and acting
great, effective
and
horror.
that is when
And
Sexton III really sells that,
Big time,
man.
big
he's,
time.
like a real guy would scream.
I really got to credit Brad Anderson, the director, on this. I know he had a co-screenwriter, but whatever his hand on this screenplay, his shot selection, his cinematography, 2001, so there was a lot of digital filmmaking being done at that time, but there was still a lot of filmmaking being done at that time. And this really stands out as a beautiful digital film from that era. But I just think the sound design, everything about this, on every technical level, it is a marvel. And then the category we're here to talk about, psychological horror.
Yeah.
This lives up to be just the epitome of what you want from a psychological horror, because there are some real horrors going on to be had in the film. There's some real element of danger at times, but so much of it really is just a psychological element and how this place and the effects of these tapes and the person on the tapes, that part you kind of have to see the movie and make up your own mind of how that plays into it. But the Session 9 tapes, Mary Hobbs, who's on the tapes, and Peter Mullen's own personal storyline, the way those three mix really messes with your mind in like just the perfect way a psychological horror movie should.
And everything that happens in this movie, with the exception of the fact that people are dead, everything is very suggestive. There's so much going on in Peter Mullen's head that by the end of it, what really did happen, like you said, the tapes are going on. Did that influence him? He hears Simon's dialogue through Mary Hobbs' voice at the beginning. Did that influence him? It's all suggestive. It's all like maybe this, maybe this, maybe a little bit of this, maybe a little bit of this. It all is boiled into a big pot of awesome, eerie tension.
This was a great experience to watch this movie again. I knew it was a great movie. I knew it had all the atmosphere and the eerie, the location, and just everything about it, the cast. Everything that I loved about it on this repeat viewing, I loved that first time around, but it's just so much more rewarding when you do know the story to some degree and get to watch it with all that information.
Oh, I know what this is now. It's one of those beers they mix with V8 juice.
Okay.
That's why it tastes like
I took
shit.
a sip, but I'm not going back to it.